This week's episode of I Was a Teenage Film Snob is not brought to you by cassette tapes or vinyl. Welcome to I Was a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, your friendly neighborhood film snob. And this week, we're leaving the apocalypse behind yet again, going on a bit of a different tangent and trying something very new for the show. We're going to talk about music, which is a little bit different for us. Still keeping on theme, of course, it's going to be movie music. We're going to talk about scores and soundtracks and all sorts of fun stuff. But wanted to do something a bit different with an existing guest, but also a new guest. So our returning guest is someone who's done the show a number of times and has some wonderful lists in the past. And he's a seasoned veteran, as I mentioned off mic just before. So please welcome back to the show, David Anderton.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Good to have you back, David. And we have a brand new guest this week. And I'll be perfectly honest, someone I haven't spoken to that much, but every interaction has been nothing but lovely. And he's a huge cinephile as well. So I'm very excited to have him on. It's David's brother, Matt. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hey, everyone. First time, long time. Well, sort of. But no, this is it's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're so welcome. We had a lovely chat at Liz's birthday a month or so ago. And you were talking about how you followed the show and you were listening to the show. I was like, oh, great. Well, we should get you on then. Like that's the way it works. People who listen end up on the show eventually. So
yeah, we might have to tell our listeners that we might sound a little bit similar. You might have to call us in, James, because our listeners might get a little bit confused about who's speaking.
I was going to say I've always dreamt of an evening with twins. It's not going quite the way I expected it, but that's fine. How many times have you had that joke in your life? Probably all the time.
Well, it's an audio medium, it's going to be a bit tricky, isn't it? Because Dave and I do sound, this is Matt speaking now, so Dave and I do sound a little bit similar. So I don't know whether we have a bell or we have a buzzer or we have some sort of safe word or something just to
Safe word.
chip in to kind of say who's speaking at a time. But yeah, I reckon you're right, Dave. Calling us in mightn't be a bad idea, James.
Okay, so that was Matt. Dave, just talk for a second.
Yeah, g'day everyone. Yeah,
I think we can. I think they can tell the difference, but I can definitely guide as well. That'll be fine. I think you've got a slightly higher register, David, so I think we'll be okay. But we can definitely play with that, or just confuse the audience. You know, whatever we need to do.
That's not foreign to us, to be honest. Everybody's around us.
Yeah. Excellent. So we're talking soundtracks, which I think I suggested, but it wasn't originally my idea. I think, David, you'd mentioned it. Even Matt, you just kind of toyed with the idea of soundtracks as well when we were talking about it before. Just do something a little bit different because I know you, and we'll talk about your history with film in a moment, Matt, but I know that you guys obviously grew up together and had a lot of similar interests, and there were some concerns that your lists might be quite similar if we focused on a certain kind of movie. So we're trying something a little bit different, and sounds like we're going to have some pretty varied lists, I think, this evening.
Yeah, well, look, if I think about Dave's lists, we were scratching around, I think, messaging each other a couple of days ago, just getting some ideas down there. And I thought, I wonder if he's got the same as me. And then, of course, Dave messages me and says, oh, what are your top lists? Because I reckon I might have the same as you. And as it turns out, we probably did, didn't we?
Just about. At first, when Matt messaged me, a few days ago, he said, I was up in Noosa at the time, and he said, what are your thoughts? And I said, well, I haven't done my list yet, but maybe don't tell me what yours are. You just wait and see, don't tell me. But then I got back and I started thinking more about it, and I thought, actually, maybe I do need to know, because I would say that good chances that we've got 5 out of 5 exactly the same. And yeah, sure enough, initially we did, but fortunately there's plenty to draw from. So I've mixed it up a little bit, and the good thing is that Matt's list I'll be able to speak extensively about as well. So it'll be a good show. We'll be able to have a lot to talk about.
Excellent. And we're doing music. We're doing soundtrack and score for those playing at home, and we'll get to the lists in a little bit. But I said to you before we even started recording, guys, I said I don't think I have a single score on my list. It was very hard. because initially I had so many ideas. I think I had a list of about 50. I was just like, well, this is great, this is great, this is great. And then I had to kind of set up a criteria that was suitable for me. So I was like, well, what do I listen to most? What's the one that I keep going back to? What's something that I won't skip on the iPod, that kind of thing. And with scores, I wouldn't have been able to speak knowledgeably. I've been like, well, I like the theme from Jaws, but, what's the name of the bit when they're walking down the beach? I can't remember. Like, what's the name of the festival music? I don't know. So I kind of kept it to soundtrack, whereas I believe both of you have got a bit more score in there, which would be great for the listeners as well, because then we'll have a really nice variety and there won't be too much doubling up, I don't think.
Yeah, the criteria I think that I chose, James, was what tracks do I want to listen to? What albums do I put on again and again? Because they keep me interested and they remind me of the movie and take me back to the movie. So so that's how I've gone about it anyway.
Excellent.
And similar to Dave. Similar to Dave, I would say, when I think about movie soundtracks, and there are some classic movie soundtracks that have got some great songs through them and all that sort of stuff, and they do remind you of the movie. But for me, thinking about when I grew up as, and you couldn't easily go and put on a DVD or a CD or what, and you had to wait 6 months for the VHS to come out and all that sort of thing. So one of the great ways of revisiting a movie was to listen to the soundtrack, because you were able to then to sort of re-immerse yourself back into that space, and without having the visual there, you were still able to hear the movie as it played out and all the story beats and all that sort of thing through sound. So that's one of the ways that I sort of looked at it. Which of the movies and soundtracks remind me of that movie as I listen to them?
Yeah, definitely. I know there's a soundtrack on my list, which we owned on audio cassette and CD, and I also have it on vinyl. It's one of those soundtracks that I, as a kid, probably played every week without doubt, start to finish. It's just one of, and when I say it, David, you probably already know what it is already, but if you don't, like, it's going to say like, oh yeah, of course, that makes total sense. There are a couple of soundtracks that I was worried we might double up on, David, and possibly Matt as well. But that's okay if it does. It just means it's good, and we've all got good taste, so that's fine.
Let's find out. Yeah.
Before we jump into the list, Matt, what we like to do with new guests is talk about their history and how they got into films, and were they kind of big cinephiles growing up, or did they discover it later? Now, obviously, having interviewed David, I know you had a similar upbringing, but where does it begin for you? Where do you kind of start your film journey? When do you start realizing, like, oh, I love this. This is something I'm keen on?
Yeah, so I know Dave spoke about this a couple of episodes ago, or probably even when he first came on. For me, my first memory of film was going to see E.T. And I think Dave mentioned that, and I remember going with Dave and my dad, and I think it was my uncle at the time. We went to Knox and saw E.T. there, and I just remember that scene where E.T.'s in the shed, and the ball comes out, and it's still I must have been 5 at the time, and it still gives you that sort of that haunting memory, even though it's not necessarily a scary thing. It's just that, what is that? And being 5, you've got that innocence, you've got that, that sort of that, you haven't got that understanding of the world just yet. You're thinking, what is this thing throwing a ball back out of a shed? And then and you think about that scene, the background is dark, the light's coming out of this shed. In the background you can see the house, but even because it's nighttime, the sort of lights of the kitchen are coming through. It's that really kind of that eeriness and that wonder, what is this thing? And then, of course, and it may come up later in this discussion around the music of E.T. and all of this, all of that goes along with everything that was so magical about that movie. So for me, that was a really memorable moment, given it was my first cinema experience. Well, I think it was my first cinema experience. That definitely then, allowed me to then explore movies as I got older, and and even things as simple as Crocodile Dundee. I went and saw that. Yeah. Foot Rot Flats. I remember seeing that a few times. Well, probably once with Dave. And the music of Foot Rot Flats. If you think about the classic song in the Foot Rot Flats movie, that was really memorable. But I
think that might be the first mention of Foot Rot Flats on the podcast. So you might have just made the first reference to that one. So.
Nobody, and I'd be shocked if anybody under 40 can remember Foot Rot Flats, but
Football flats.
I mean, look, my listeners are mainly nerds, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. So you'd probably get a couple who pick up on it, although the American audience is probably like, what's that? So,
What the hell? Yeah.
But Dave and I we'd walk up to the local cinema where we lived, up at Waverley Gardens. We'd walk up there as we got a bit older, earned our own money. Would go up, and I was mentioning this to my kids the other day when they were trying to get Taylor Swift tickets, and I said, you used to just have to go up to Ticketek, stand in the queue for however long, get your ticket. But not only would you do that for theatres or shows or concerts, but you do it for movies as well.
yeah.
So Dave and I would get up there a week before a movie comes out. We'd try and order our tickets early, and of course, when you got your ticket, you had to then queue up again to get in, because if you were first in line, you got the best seats. So it's all those memories about, for me, going to the cinema with Dave mostly and family, going to see some movies with friends for birthdays, and then of course buying those memorable movies that you had on VHS and watching them back, or sitting back on the Sunday nights watching the movie on a Sunday night on the TV, and whatever was on, that's just what you had to watch. So just all of those things about movies for me, they're all the memories that come up. And obviously there's some special films which Dave and I have shared together, but certainly tonight's discussion about soundtracks, a lot of those films will come up that have been memorable for me, and also the soundtracks that go with them.
Excellent. It's so funny. All the things you talk about so lovingly remembering are things that I love as well. Kids these days would hate them. Like lining up for a film. Like I was telling you guys before we started recording that I went to the movies at my childhood cinema the other night, and they don't do reserved seating. And like I should have been annoyed by that, but I was like, oh, I remember this. I remember having to wait. I remember, having to wait for VHS like 6 months to come out. I remember not having the flexibility of a streaming service. There's 3 channels. These are the movies you pick. Like kids would hate that, but I'm the reverse. I hate the oversaturation. Like, no, just limit my choices. Make it easy for me. So I treasure those memories as well. That's a very fond memory for me. And we talked, I think, on David's first episode about the video store being a huge part of our childhoods as well. I'm sure that's a big part for you as well, Matt.
Oh yeah, for sure. Dave and I would walk up. Where we live, we'd go and walk up to the local, and it'd be a fair way away. We'd go. We used to live in Mulgrave, and we'd walk up to Wheelers Hill and grab something from the video shop and come back, and so you'd get 6 for $6 or whatever it was.
Yeah, like 2 new releases and 3 weeklies or something.
Yeah, whatever it was. Yeah. So yeah, all those sorts of things. You come back and look, probably my memories of movies like Indiana Jones, for example. They're movies you get on VHS, because I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go and see them at the cinema. Well, even Star Wars.
Yeah.
I think the first Star Wars movie I actually saw was Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
I don't think I'd seen the original. I don't think I'd seen A New Hope, and I certainly hadn't seen Empire Strikes Back until I saw Return of the Jedi. It wasn't until later on I went back and saw them, because, of course, I was too young to go and see them. So you relied on those VHS tapes, going up to the local video store, renting them, watching them to death over and over again, because that's what we love. So yeah, that definitely, they're all the memories that really that I definitely remind me of cinema.
I love all that. Like, again, that's like a warm hug for me. Everything you're talking about, I'm like, yes, that's exactly how I remember it. I didn't show you before. I always show, because I'm a big physical media guy. I always show the collection. I do have a wall of movies just over here, so you can see it's getting a bit crazy at the moment. But I refuse to let it die. So that's not for the audience, obviously, because it's an audio medium. Apologies, but
it's a big wall. And it has. Yeah, it's a big wall and it has lots of movies on it.
I do put photos up every now and then. I think we're just over 800 now. So I had a couple more come in the mail this morning, which was good. So, my daughter will inherit a dead medium when I die. So it'll be good. So we're talking about soundtracks today, as we mentioned a couple of times now. It's an interesting one, because I think if you're not a film fan, you maybe don't appreciate it as much. I feel like the sound and the score often goes unappreciated by the casual moviegoer, unless it's something like, like a Guardians of the Galaxy, which I'm sure as a movie will come up today, I imagine at some point, or any of those kind of like, there are a couple of big movies that had quite jukeboxy soundtracks, but beyond that, I feel like it's a medium that does get a little bit overlooked and underappreciated. But I remember, David, you were telling me a story about teaching a psychology class and showing people like the Jaws theme and stuff like that, and the kids just had no idea what it was.
No. And yeah, that's right. It was an important lesson. I do remember telling that story, an important lesson about fear and phobias. Yeah, and they had no idea what the Jaws soundtrack represented. So
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just funny. Sorry.
No, sorry, James. I was going to say, Dave and I are both teachers, but I've even used movie soundtracks as a inspiration for writing. I'm a primary school teacher, but things like Superman, for example.
Yes.
You put that on, and you ask the kids to kind of go, okay, well, what thoughts do these evoke in you? What are the pictures that play in your mind? All of those sorts of things that come to mind when you listen to something like, and certainly, Superman, we all see and hear that soundtrack for us. But, for kids, it's amazing when you play that. Those of them who haven't seen Superman, they get, different things. But all of them come to the realization, it does sound a bit superhero-y. So that paints the picture. That's what, for me, the soundtrack does, paints the picture of what's happening in front of you.
The superhero example is a really interesting one because something that I've noticed, particularly with DC films, but even with Marvel to an extent, they seem to have lost that kind of iconic status. Like if I talked to you about 78 Superman, if I told you about 89 Batman, you can hum those themes straight away. Can you hum the Man of Steel theme for me if I ask you to right now? Can you hum like the Dark Knight aside from the like, it's just like very industrial and aggressive. Like they've kind of gone into this very unusual. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like a soundscape as opposed to a theme because I could not hum a bar of any of those soundtracks these days.
It came up for me just today actually because I had a very sleepless night last night, and again, apologies if the audience is, the listeners are struggling with me. I've got a bit of a blocked up nose at the moment. But
I've been a bit gurgly. I don't know if you've noticed. Like I've got the gurgs, so we're all good. It's just going to be it's fitting because it's such an audio focused show this time. So just bring some sound effects in.
So I had a very, very sleepless night last night. So I stayed up and actually watched Dune for the second time, and the Denis Villeneuve, the most recent one.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm sitting there and I'm listening to it, because Hans Zimmer did the score for Dune, and
I thought it might have been Hans. Yeah,
it's less music than it is a sound. It's not so much music. It's really like just the sound that creates the atmosphere. It's not orchestral at all. It's just loud. It's bombastic. It's Hans Zimmer, but it has changed. It absolutely has changed.
Yeah, like Marvel still does a little bit. Like to me, like the Guardians theme is quite recognizable. The Avengers theme obviously is very recognizable. Captain America's theme, but yeah, it does seem to be kind of moving away from that. And I just know whether the audiences, these kids are edgier now and they need something a bit more hardcore. They're like a little bit afraid of, the fanfare, but I don't know. I miss it. It's one thing I do miss from these modern superheroes is that kind of bombastic, very loud, like this is a Superman song, like just instead just a series of noise.
Do you know what's changed though is that where there used to be, if you watch Superman back or you watch even the first Spider-Man or Batman, those movies, they always had the opening title credits at the start of the movie, and that often had the main title theme or the main theme for the movie, and so they presented the movie that way. Whereas now, a movie opens, and certainly if it's a superhero movie or any really action movie, it opens with an opening action sequence.
Yeah,
and so you miss out on that title sequence, that title track. And so it doesn't hook you like as again, I'm a psychology teacher, and there's a lot to be said about, the primacy effect and the recency effect, which is the first thing you hear is really memorable and the last thing you hear is really memorable. And so if you take away the music at the start, or you don't make that a memorable track, then it sort of vanishes. It just sort of you just sort of lose it. You don't associate the music with the movie as much as you do anymore. So yeah, and often the end credits are now it's a pop song that they're going to play on
Yeah.
a video or something like that, you know. So yeah, that's where it's sort of dropped away a little bit.
Well, you know what they've replaced it with is they've replaced it with the Marvel theme song. Like all the Marvel films now
Yeah.
have that fanfare. It's like, don't worry about Spider-Man's theme, but this is the brand's theme song. So, which I do like, but it does, yeah, like you raised an interesting point, and it does definitely kind of take away from the memorability, if that's a word,
Yeah.
of the kind of that theme. Yeah.
And you know what? What's replaced it is you. It's actually a really good point that you make there about the studio fanfare,
Mm.
because what you get with a studio fanfare is that sense of familiarity. It's like, right, cool, right, I'm in a happy place. I know where I am. I know this world. I know this universe, and so right, I'm in. You're in from the opening fanfare. When it comes to a Marvel movie or whatever, DC is starting to do it, but
Yeah, they don't have their own theme yet, but they've got that little like. I mean, who knows what's going to happen now? Whether they
Yeah.
keep that opening visual, if they change, I don't know what's going to happen. But
yeah, but it does create that brand association. So it sets you into a mindset. Right, I know what I'm in for here, and yeah, interesting.
we didn't really break into the psychology of it until now, but it's like, yeah, that is interesting. Okay, yeah, they're definitely doing something there to us. So,
Yeah.
Right, we've got 3 lists to get through today. I think the best way to do it is go. We'll go, number 5 each, number 4 each, so on and so forth. I think we should start with Matt because it's your first time. So we'll start with your number 5 first, then we'll jump to Dave, then to me, and we'll just go around like that. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of discussion to be had about each track, or each album. It's not just the track; it's the entire soundtrack. So, Matt, what's number 5 on your list?
So, James, you talked earlier about you've got probably a mix of song lists or musical people who play through the soundtracks effectively, like a group of songs or selection of songs. I've gone with all of my top 5 movie scores.
Fantastic.
So they're all orchestral scores that I think symbolic of the movie and are representative of the movie themselves. And
Great.
I would think, with probably the exception of one, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, I think when I talk about them, people will instantly identify the sound or hopefully get an impression of the music that plays along with that movie. So my first one, my number 5, was a movie that came out in 1995. So for some of you listeners may not have seen this movie, but it was a brilliant movie, actually acted and directed by the same person, Australian, and that was Mel Gibson. So my number 5 is Braveheart.
Excellent.
The movie soundtrack of Braveheart. Now, this soundtrack was written and composed by James Horner, who sadly died in a plane crash in 2015. So he's no longer with us. But James Horner's, his music has actually gone through many movies that are very memorable. So for example, Titanic. Titanic is a film composed and written by James Horner. Aliens is another one. Yeah. So maybe not as iconic, but certainly if you listen to Aliens, there's a really intense score that runs through that whole movie. A Beautiful Mind. If you have a chance to have a listen to A Beautiful Mind, the soundtrack of A Beautiful Mind, the score, it's a brilliant soundtrack. James Horner wrote that one as well, and certainly Avatar more recently. Well, the first Avatar, James Horner was the music. But I think the reason I chose Braveheart at my number 5 spot is because, for me, when you think about the setting, the story of Braveheart, a Scottish, very Scottish history, the whole William Wallace story around the history of him fighting against a tyrannical English king and prince, and the whole love story that goes along with that, him falling in love with a princess, that forbidden love, the French princess. But if you think about the score that goes along and you listen to the score, the traditional Scottish sounds of bagpipes, the flutes, the woodwinds and the fiddles, all of these instruments that go along with it. And James Horner does a great job of blending that traditional Scottish sound with that orchestral mix as well. So he brings in, your trumpets and your woodwind and a lot of your horns and things like that. Percussion plays a big role, particularly in the battle scenes in Braveheart. But I think when I listen to it, there's one piece of music when I listen, well, it's probably two actually. The two bits of music that I think are really iconic with Braveheart is there's the love theme that plays with William Wallace and the Princess. That's a really iconic. If you listen to that, if anyone gets a chance to have a listen to the Braveheart soundtrack, choose that song. It's called For the Love of a Princess. So I happen to go on that. That's very iconic as part of Braveheart. But also the end part, which is very emotional, where it's called Freedom. The track itself is called Freedom, and it's a very last part of the movie where William Wallace, Mel Gibson's character, basically says they'll never take. They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. And then, spoiler, there's a bit of an execution. An execution scene, which is very emotional. But if you layer that scene with the music over the top of it, it just heightens the emotion, it heightens the impacts. And whilst you never see him actually being executed, the thought when you listen back to that music, you can actually feel what's happening at that moment and at that time during that execution scene. It's actually quite moving just to listen back to it. So for me, that's why I've chosen Braveheart as number 5. Traditional Scottish orchestral sound, but it really puts you in that place and you really get a sense for the history of what's happening in that movie.
It's a great flick. I haven't seen Braveheart in a long time, so I obviously I remember kind of dribs and drabs of the score. And you raised an excellent point, Matt, which we didn't talk about before, which is that's the point of the soundtrack, is to tell you how to feel in the movie. But it is an excellent one. Sorry, did I cut you off? Were you going to say something else, Matt?
No, I was just going to say, it won an Oscar for Best Original Score in 1995 as well. So for me, just being able to be awarded and with the recognition for that, I think was an important milestone for James Horner and the work that he did in that movie.
And James Horner, you mentioned earlier, James Horner also did Titanic, and Titanic almost made my list. But, for what James Horner did for the Scottish soundtrack, he did for an Irish soundtrack. So you got the sound of Scotland in Braveheart, and you got the sound of Ireland in Titanic. So, they're very, very similar scores in that sense.
And maybe a bit of an overachiever. Like just having one of those films under his belt would have been enough. But he had Titanic, he had Aliens, he had Avatar. Like he definitely clearly a fan of James Cameron and did quite a bit of work with him as well. Just I think 3 of those films are his. So
yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, I did mention it earlier. And whilst A Beautiful Mind didn't get on my list, there are some absolutely amazing songs or tracks within the soundtrack for A Beautiful Mind, particularly the title track. If you just listen to the theme of A Beautiful Mind, and that was the one that Russell Crowe made, that movie, then it's an amazing soundtrack, and you'll hear some amazing songs that James Horner has written.
Excellent. That's a strong start. What have you got for number 5, Dave?
Oh, now I've gone back and forth on number 5. I changed my number 5 about an hour ago. I reckon probably just before we got on. I've been back and forth on it. I know Matt, I was, just texting Matt, what do you reckon, this one or that one? And he's like, maybe I'd lean towards that one rather than that one. And in the end, I've not gone with the one that I picked initially at all. I've gone with something that I think is going to create a little bit of conversation amongst us. This soundtrack is both a score and an album, I guess a collaboration album. They sort of released it in two ways, which they can do with a lot of, they release the score and then they release the soundtrack as well. This one is for Black Panther.
Nice.
Yeah, I listen to Black Panther a lot.
That theme is so good.
Yeah. So look, it has made my number 5, but for that reason, I think both the score and the actual collaboration soundtrack with Kendrick Lamar
Yep.
is, I think both of them are equally strong and strong enough to make the top 5 for me. So I think it really captures that the African roots that Ludwig Göransson is the composer, and he uses traditional African drums, in particular the drums, to create to really put you in Africa. But he also he uses a lot of tracks, like he even represents vibranium. He even uses music to represent the strength of vibranium. He's got the theme for T'Challa and the theme for Killmonger, because they're obviously both related but different characters. If you listen to the music, there's also you can see that dissonance between you can sort of, when you listen back to it, you go that's clearly the king of Wakanda, and this is the rebel, this is the antagonist. And so really great energy, great intensity throughout the scene, throughout the whole soundtrack. And just there's a particular, I don't know what the African drum is called, but they used it in the first movie, and then they used it in the second movie, and it comes up a couple of times in a few of the other series and a few of the other movies when Okoye shows up in a few. You can hear those African drums sound again.
I think it came up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier as well.
Yeah,
when the Dora Milaje showed up. I always think of the horns. There's that very distinct royal, regal sounding kind of horn sound that they play when they first enter Wakanda for the first time, and then I think even in Infinity War when they arrive in Wakanda, it's just like a burst of like 3 horns. It's perfect. Like, it's really well done.
Yeah, and it actually really features in Avengers Endgame when T'Challa shows up through the portal, and at first you don't see him. All you see is Falcon flying through the screen, and then next thing you see what the T'Challa and the rest of the Wakandans there, and you only have to hear the music, to know what's about to happen. It's just such I think of all of the, maybe except for the Avengers theme, I think of all of the other Marvel scores, this one stands out for me as a score. And then you got to go to the soundtrack, which is a Kendrick Lamar collaboration. And there's probably 4 tracks that I think if your listeners want to listen to it, there's probably 4 tracks that stand out for me from the Kendrick Lamar. It's called Black Panther, the album. And there's 4. There's the first 2, which is just called Black Panther, track number 1. Track number 2 is called All the Stars, which is a Kendrick Lamar and SCA collaboration.
Was that the closing theme, All the Stars?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And then there's track 5, which is sort of Ops, which plays when they're in the city. The chase scene through the city. Yeah, so that's one, and the last one is Pray For Me, which is The Weeknd. And Kendrick Lamar. So they're probably the big 4, and that's just a fantastic album. Listen from track 1 all the way to track 14.
I was gonna say, I think that Weeknd one is in the casino, if I remember correctly, when they made up with Everett Ross. It's funny, like, I wouldn't have thought of it being an iconic soundtrack, but every single track you mentioned, I'm like, oh, I remember that scene. I couldn't do that if you told me, a different, like, with the exception of maybe Guardians, a different like kind of Marvel soundtrack. I wouldn't be able to pick something out. Maybe First Avenger, because there's like the showgirl sequence, stuff like that. Most of them are pretty nondescript.
The Guardians soundtrack is almost on par, but for me, when I put them side by side, I didn't think about both soundtrack and score. This one won it over for me. So so Black Panther is my number 5.
I love that Ludwig Göransson has become one of the modern go-to composers, because I don't know how people know this, but he kind of made his bones on Community. That's kind of where he started. Like, he does all the music for Community, which is brilliant. by the way. Like, it's so fun and emotive, and like there's a track which like my wife like always rolls her eyes at now because it always makes me cry, even though it's like from a sitcom about like community kids, but it's just like perfectly done. But he went from that to being like, oh, I'm just going to work with Ryan Coogler on every film he makes, and I'm going to win awards, and I'm just taking over the world, which is a wonderful story.
Yeah, I mean,
now, of course,
I
I was going to say,
you go on. I know what you're going to say now.
you probably do. There you go. Here you go. This is the trouble with being on a show with twins. We probably both have similar thoughts at once. But just say snap, David, if you reckon if I say what you were about to say. But his work on The Mandalorian. Yeah, there you go, snap. And of course the Book of Boba Fett and a lot of those, the Disney shows now. Look, his work, and lots of people have watched The Mandalorian, so you'd hear that sound, you'd hear the score and the soundtrack that plays through that's really iconic. So you're right, James. He's definitely the go-to guy, I'd say, at the moment.
And it's interesting about Mandalorian because there is a very Black Panther-esque sound to that Mandalorian track. Just that, like even the drums, just like the dun, 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 like it's very tribal and it feels very Black Panther-esque as well. So
I don't know if you know this, but Ludwig Göransson actually does a lot of the music himself. Like he will learn to play the instruments, and some of them are actually quite cultural. They're not your mainstream type instruments, orchestral instruments. They're very they have their roots in countries and cultures, and he will teach himself to play those instruments and therefore represent that as part of whatever he's doing. So in that sense, he is a true composer and a true musician.
No, definitely. Excellent. Two strong starters. I'm going to have to really bring my game now. So my number 5 is a soundtrack. It is the music is also very, very good, but I'm looking more at the songs. This is the one I mentioned before, which I had on cassette, CD, and now vinyl as well. Pretty short soundtrack, 11 tracks for a movie that could be described as a musical in part. But there's not a song I would take off. There's not a song I skip when I play it. And that is the soundtrack to the Blues Brothers.
A good one.
Brothers.
Yeah, so really good soundtrack. I've listened to that soundtrack more than any soundtrack my entire life, I reckon. And I'll be honest, you could throw in any album they all did together. Even Blues Brothers 2000, while the film has its issues, the music's really good on that as well. Briefcase Full of Blues is really good, but I'll stick with the original soundtrack. It's just classic, funk, soul, rhythm and blues, done by the best people in the world. You've got Aretha Franklin on there, you've got James Brown on there. The Blues Brothers band, like Steve Cropper and Donald Dunn, and I'm gonna forget someone because it's been a while since I've looked at all those names. But every track, like opening with She Caught the Katy, closing on Jailhouse Rock, like every track in it is just fun.
Yeah,
fun. Like it's really captures the tone of the film. Like if I listen to a track, I know exactly what part of the film I'm talking to, and I think it kind of transcends time. It's a timeless soundtrack. It doesn't matter whether you grew up in the 50s and listened to that music, or you grew up in the 80s and watched Blues Brothers, or whether you're a kid now. Like I played it for Zoe when she was first born. Like when I first started showing her music, and she was getting into it because she just loved the horns. It's a perfect soundtrack to me. Like it just
give me some lovin'. That's on that. Yeah,
Shake Your Tail Feather with Ray Charles. Even like the instrumental, like the Peter Gunn theme. Like who would have thought that just like an old TV show theme would be perfect for that movie?
Yeah.
And I always think of like, I don't know the last time you saw Blues Brothers, but whenever Peter Gunn theme comes on, all I think of is when they're walking down the streets of Chicago and there's the big fluorescent light of the lips, and they just kind of go dark and they go light again. Like immediately I think of that. And I haven't watched Blues Brothers in a couple of years. Like I always think of that. And then the flick itself, like just a killer cast, like Carrie Fisher, Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi. Like I don't know, like that was, I knew, knowing the Blues Brothers hasn't really come up on the show that much before, the soundtrack was definitely making my list because it's just excellent.
Yeah.
That is a good one, James. That is a great one. Great selection.
Excellent. I will take that. And that's the clip for this week, just getting affirmation that I had a good choice.
You're on the right track. Approved.
Yeah. I don't
No,
have too much.
it didn't cross my mind. It's funny you mentioned the blue. Didn't cross my mind, although until you mentioned it, I went, "Oh, of course."
Mm.
Yeah.
You don't get much more iconic than that, and it is. Yeah, that's why I say that's a great choice.
Especially considering it's such a cult film. Like, it's definitely, I wouldn't say it's the height of its popularity anymore, but there was a time, I want to say, kind of in the in the 2010s, everyone I spoke to had seen Blues Brothers, but when I was a kid, no one had. Like, it's interesting the longevity that film's had, and for a film of its time, pretty safe. Like, it actually, in terms of, like, it actually holds up. There's not really anything too problematic in that movie. Like, there are some films from that era I can't say the same about. I can't go back and watch Animal House the way I used to watch Animal House. The Police Academy films have some questionable stuff. Even Back to the Future has some questionable things that we'll gladly overlook because it's enjoyable. But Blues Brothers, all things considered, managed to walk the line pretty well. So it's not one you kind of have to say sheepishly that you like. It's a strong flick still. So
No, great choice, James.
excellent, good stuff, Matt. That brings us to your number 4.
All right, so this one, for me, is very memorable for me going to watch this at the cinema. I can't remember how many times I saw it at the cinemas. It would have been, look, I can remember twice, but it was probably more than that. It was a film in 1993, directed by Steven Spielberg, music by John Williams, and that is Jurassic Park.
Oh, so there's 2 films that year. There's a really sad one and there's a really fun one.
I was almost going to say directed by Steven Spielberg, written by John Williams, Schindler's List, but definitely no. Look, even though Schindler's List won the Oscar that year, Jurassic Park for me, just that sense of that awe and wonder, and it's actually interesting what John Williams does with the score is it's in 2 parts. His score has this, it's really bright and uplifting and childlike. There are moments in that film when you listen to the movie, watch the movie and listen to the music. When you think about that movie, it is a movie of 2 halves, really. There's the start where it talks, where it shows the majesty and basically the wonder of seeing dinosaurs in real life. And then you've got Act 2, which is actually really quite dark and terrorizing. And then as you move into Act 3 and the finale, it becomes that uplifting moment again. But there's this part of Jurassic Park when you listen to the music that starts with their journey onto the island in the helicopter. That whole idea that just this space opens up and you listen to the music and it just becomes this rousing sound. And then going through the gates of Jurassic Park and then of course the most iconic moment of all, I think, Jurassic Park is seeing the Brachiosaurus.
Yes.
But then the music that goes along with it, because when you listen to that music at the very start, they're sitting in the car. You don't see the dinosaur in the background. You don't see the Brachiosaurus in the background, but you just see their faces. But when you listen to the music of just that section there, because you don't know what to expect, and it's dinosaurs, let's be honest, but you don't know what sort of dinosaur it is. So then there's this kind of really haunting, almost like an undertone of terror or sense of fear in that music. And then, of course, you see the Brachiosaurus and it just opens up. And then the theme just that goes along with the iconic Jurassic Park theme that sort of weaves its way into that into that fanfare that goes along. You hear your trumpets and your horns and all the things that go along with raising the sense of wonder that goes along with all of that. And as I said, you move into the T-Rex and the raptors, and it's that real staccato, quite tension rising music that plays. You really get a sense of that fear. But throughout there's that, like I said to you, that theme, the Jurassic Park theme that sort of flows through. There's this one moment in Jurassic Park where you see Hammond, he's sitting in the cafeteria.
Eating ice cream.
Eating the ice cream, and he talks about Petticoat Lane, the little, the flea circus, and there's John Williams does this great thing where, you can hear the music rising, and as I mentioned a few times, that sense of awe. But then he brings it right down, and there's this piano piece that plays in the background, and even just this little. But it's the same theme, but because he's talking about, it's almost like this lost sense of hope. You get a real feel for, Hammond has created this amazing park, and he's just gone. And now, excuse me, Jack, can I swear in this?
Oh
Just a little
yeah,
bit? Is that
absolutely. There's
all
no
right?
rules. Yeah,
Has he
no worry.
broken
Like
this?
my
Dave's-
wife has said
I
the
think
worst
Dave's
things you can
broken
ever
this
hear on a show, and then one of my guests the other day did it twice, so we're all good.
But he realizes that it's all turned to shit.
Yeah.
He's created this amazing thing, but it's all turned to shit.
Mm.
But the score that John Williams does is he plays the same theme, but slightly different. But it becomes childlike, and he just brings it down. And then once we go through to Act 3 and we see the T-Rex once more, that very final scene, well, not quite, but the final scene where the T-Rex overthrows the raptors, there the score comes back in. That the amazing that sound, the fanfare comes back in. Just that whole triumphant. He does an amazing job in this movie, John Williams, and I think it's a real credit. And I think it's an absolute travesty that it wasn't nominated for an Academy Award. Not that that's the be all and end all, but I think it was a travesty. I mean, it did lose to The Lion King that year, and Schindler's List was the year before it. So there's probably a couple of the scores there that are also worthy. But I do think it's a travesty that it wasn't nominated for Best Original Score in that year. But that's
I guess
my number 4.
at least John Williams lost to himself, I suppose, one year. So it's tough when you have to pick between. But just thinking about John Williams, I'm sure this is not the last time he'll come up today. To get one iconic theme song is an achievement, but I couldn't count how many iconic themes he has. Like, obviously, the entirety of Spielberg's filmography, pretty much. But even outside of that, like he worked on Harry Potter and Superman. Like, he's just like, it's crazy to think that someone that, and he's not done. And Star Wars, sorry, I didn't even talk about that. That's not Spielberg, but like he's still going, like in his 80s or 90s now. He's just like, I'm just going to do them until I'm done, I guess. And they're always brilliant.
Yeah, 92, I think he is now, John Williams. Still going.
Because I know he was going to stop with these new Star Wars films, but then with Indy 5, he's like, well, I got to do Indy 5. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He originally, interestingly, with Indy 5, he originally wanted just to write the theme, the iconic Indy theme song. And as he was writing it, he went, "Nah, I'm just going to write the whole thing." And he said to Steven Spielberg, who's the producer on that, "I'm just going to write the whole thing." And so he did.
Yeah.
So that's his most recent one.
And the music's great. Excellent, David. You're number 4.
Yeah, well, this one probably along similar lines to the previous one I had. This one is another African soundtrack, but this one is for The Lion King.
Nice.
So this one, the score was by Hans Zimmer, but the other music that was written by Elton John and Tim.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
Tim Rice.
Yeah. So a mix of both the score and
we see the game you're playing, David, and it's very clever. It's very clever.
But no, this one, I just think this one is Hans Zimmer's best. I think some of his other scores just get. I mentioned Dune before we started, and I think they just get washed out, and they're a bit loud, and they're just a bit too noisy and a bit too bombastic. But this one,
it's that very modern industrial kind of like, you said it before. Instead of like it being a song, it's just stretched out walls of sound, which might be suitable, but he's probably doing it better than everyone else. But it's all the same. There was a trend that started. I think it started with Inception, or maybe the Transformers films, where every action film had to have just like big like boom, like big like klaxon sounds in each other to like build suspense, and then everyone was like, "Oh, that's how we do action now," and they've just never gone back to what it was before then, for the most part.
Yeah, there's probably Hans Zimmer's. He's got so many terrific scores. Through they are fantastic.
Like Gladiator is brilliant.
Yeah. that nearly made my list, I have to say, Gladiator. But with the Lion King, because again, the opening track is Circle of Life, and I remember seeing this movie. Matthew probably remember it too. We were up in Queensland at the time, and I just thought the first 5 minutes is there's no dialogue. It's just the animals approaching Pride Rock, and and the Circle of Life song really just puts you in that setting and in that environment, and it just it sets the emotional tone for the film. And then you come back to the Circle of Life at the end of the movie. So it really does sort of represent, that song in particular represents that circular nature of the whole story, really.
Definitely.
And if you haven't seen it already, I just in researching the soundtrack for the score for it, I came across the Australian cast of The Lion King. They performed on a Virgin Australia flight coming back from Brisbane a few years ago, and they sung the Circle of Life on the plane, and it's just
cool.
delightful. So, but just watch it. It'll bring you joy for 5 minutes. So, yeah. So, I just love the cultural richness of the whole soundtrack, and the songs. The songs are really memorable. I've mentioned Circle of Life. Can You Feel the Love Tonight was a big hit for Elton John. And the other one that's on and I actually think people might disagree, but I actually think the 2019 score is better than the original score.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just think it just works a little bit better. And the 2019 soundtrack contains a song that was actually in the stage musical called "He Lives in You," which is they've added to the 2019 film. So no, it's I think it's a brilliant soundtrack, and I think it's Hans Zimmer's best, or one of his best. I think it's his best, but Matt might disagree a little bit later on. But I and really, like, the last 40 years have been dominated by two figures, haven't they? John Williams and Hans Zimmer. So they might feature again.
It's a strong entry. Like, I don't think there's a song that captures youthful jubilance more than "I Just Can't Wait to Be King." Yeah. Like, out of all of the Disney films, like, every Disney film has that one, like, all right, this is my song about being a rebel and finding out who I am. But I just don't think I think they hit their stride with that song, and nothing's kind of come close since. Like, there've been a couple in recent years which get close, but this is, the strongest. And then nothing as scary maybe as "Be Prepared," which is, chilling. Like, Jeremy Irons came to a very different movie. He was.
Yeah. There's the next time you. Oh no, I was going to say that through the other track that really stands out is the Stampede. Music. Yeah.
Yes.
Go on, Matt.
No, so I was going to say, that's true, and I love the choice of the Lion King, because I had tossed and turned around the Lion King as well. So I'm glad you picked it. But if you go back and watch the Lion King, watch that scene where he sees his dad in the clouds. Where Simba looks up at the clouds and sees his dad in the clouds, and just listen to the music there. I'd encourage you just to listen and pay attention next time you watch The Lion King, just to the music there, and see what Hans Zimmer does around that music, and how he really builds that and tells the story and injects that feeling through music that Simba must be feeling, seeing his dad magically appear in the clouds.
I can hear it now. I couldn't hum it for you off the top of my head, but it's very haunting, like, it's beautiful, and it's a very touching moment, but also there's a very kind of haunting atmosphere to it, like, kind of, knowing he's not alone, but also, like, what's happened and, what's the story been so far for him. It's a very complex piece of music for a very simple scene. It's very, it's really well done.
Yeah. Number 4, The Lion King.
Good one. So my number 4, I've gone really obscure, but it's a soundtrack I love. So I'm going to talk about a movie that maybe neither of you watched, and I understand if you haven't. You might not have even heard of it. Back in 2008, I want to say, during the height of the Saw franchise, but it's not the Saw soundtrack. One of the directors kind of, he'd done a couple of the sequels, and he got a bit of goodwill with Lionsgate, and they're like, hey, what do you want to do? And he stumbled upon these two guys who used to do 10-minute operas in a bar. And they're like, well, actually, we have this idea for a horror rock opera if you're interested. we can kind of pitch it to you. And it's this movie. There's nothing like it. It's called Repo, the Genetic Opera, and basically it's set in the future, in a future where organs can now be you can kind of take out a loan to get organ transplants, but you can also take out a loan to get like cosmetic surgery done. And basically, if you don't make your payments on time, then the repo man comes back to collect and ends up killing you. It's so unusual. I've never seen anything like it before or since. And they got like, I can't remember who they got in to do the music. I should have done my research, but I didn't. But it's just like all these kind of like very operatic and bombastic rock songs about like living in this kind of dystopian future. And it's got a great cast. Like Paul Sorvino is like the big boss. Like he's like the big villain in it. He's got quite an operatic voice, and he sings about like his 3 ungrateful children who are trying to inherit his riches. You've got this character actor Bill Moseley, who has been in everything. Like he was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and he's a big horror icon. You've got Paris Hilton, and I know people will snicker. She's brilliant in it. Like she does exactly what she needs to be in that film. You've got Alexa Vega, who was one of the girl in Spy Kids. Anthony Stewart Head, the librarian from Buffy, is your repo man, and it's such a weird film, but so wonderful. Like it's not very popular, and most people who watch it hate it, and I understand. Like it's a bizarre film, but I just think it's such an ambitious movie, and like Anthony Stewart Head plays this repo man, but he's only doing it to keep his daughter safe because his wife was murdered by the guy he works for. It's wacky.
Is it presented as a rock opera, like as a
it is a flat out musical. Like there is almost no dialogue that is unaccompanied by music, and it's very violent. So like I think it was rated like MA over here, but it would have been an R in America. But like it's a horror movie, but it's also got pop songs and rock songs and opera. Sarah Brightman is in it. Like she does, and the whole idea is that they're all trying to get to the opera at the end of the film, because like the opera is when everything's going to all the storylines are going to tie up. It's very hard for me to explain without you watching it. It's just so bizarre. But all you need to get is it's a horror film set as an opera, and it's weird. but I'll be honest, I have played that soundtrack so many times because the songs are like so catchy. Like there's a song about like the drug they inject to like make the pain go away when they're doing the surgeries, and the drug comes from the fluid of the dead bodies, and it's called Zydrate, and like it's I can't talk about it without laughing, but it's a joy. Like it's such a unusual film, and again, like there's just nothing out there like it, and it didn't get a big release because it was the Saw guy, and but it wasn't a Saw movie, so people didn't kind of give it that much attention. But I think it's a cult film in the making. Like there's definitely a cult following now, but just like kind of the early David Lynch stuff, give it a couple of years and people are going to start picking up on it and be like, oh, this is incredible. Like it's so weird. But
it's on Apple TV, so there you go, Matt. You can check that one out.
I'll be honest, I will give you guys a heads up. I tried watching with Tina the first night I picked it up from Blockbuster. 10 minutes in, she was like, I hate this. So, it's definitely an acquired taste. But I've got it on Blu-ray. I love it. And I watched it recently. I was like, is it still good, or am I remembering it wrong? I still like it. And the music is just...
love it.
It's just really fun, like to see all those very serious actors, except Paris Hilton, who I don't think ever treated herself as but she's great in it. Like that's not a diss. I just don't think she ever considered herself a serious actress. Like to just have fun with a very silly, unusual, blood-soaked concept. It's really and quite emotional. Like there's some really like lovely, like heartfelt tracks in there. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Repo because no one talks about it, and it deserves a couple of views at least.
Well, James,
I've never heard of it. I didn't even know it even was a film. So there you go.
Yeah, I would argue most people listening have probably not heard of it, but that's my job, is to bring the weird ones in.
Right. That's right. The deep dive with James.
So Matt, if you could just class things up again and show us your number 3, we can get back on track.
All right, I'll class it up. But there might be some controversy around this one. I
reckon.
Some controversy. Love some controversy because we've actually talked a bit earlier, and I was listening quite intently with the discussion that you were having around Hans Zimmer. because there was mention around, I think, James, you mentioned the stretched out wall of sound,
Mhm.
and you mentioned Inception, about those sorts of things, and but I actually think my number 3 is a genius soundtrack by Hans Zimmer, and it is Interstellar.
Oh, it's
Now,
beautiful. 100% on board
the
with
reason
Interstellar.
the reason I picked Interstellar is because it is a soundscape, but there are moments in this movie where, and like, we talked earlier about there's no sort of theme running through it. Well, there kind of is in Interstellar, but it's so simple and so subtle, and Hans Zimmer does it in various parts throughout the movie to make reference to things that have happened either at the beginning of the movie that are, unless you listen to the sound that he plays, and you have to listen quite intently with it. It's genius because there's a moment in the very start of the movie where Cooper, who's Matthew McConaughey's character, is talking with his daughter in their library, and she walks in, and this is when his daughter Murph is quite young. She walks in, and she sees lines of dust that are laid out on the ground.
Yep.
She wonders what these lines of dust are. Now, in the music that's playing in that section, later on in the film, when it gets a little bit weird in Act 3, and you see Cooper in inside the Tesseract, which is formed from him going into the black hole, the same music plays there, but it's slightly different. But the way Hans Zimmer references both of those events, once at the start of the movie and once at the end of the movie, is quite genius. I think he does it really well. They're just real subtle melodies, and he just repeats these melodies throughout the movie at various times. But there are times when it does get a little bit overwhelming. The sound becomes this really brassy sound. He brings the horns and the trumpets and all of these sounds, and particularly organ. He uses the organ really well in this movie. And there is this wall of noise that kind of happens at various points, particularly when there's a scene where they're going through the cornfield. It's called Cornfield Chase. I don't know if you remember it well, but they're driving the car trying to catch and chase down a spy drone. Now, that cornfield scene has become quite well known as part of as effectively the Interstellar theme. That sort of runs through that movie. But his Hans Zimmer's ability to create this soundscape at the start of the movie where they're on Earth, it's really quite loud and quite overwhelming at times, the sound. But it's the moment they go into space, everything just calms down. Everything just becomes a lot quieter. In fact, the soundtrack in the movie is so subtle at times, we don't even hear it. It's just there. And then there's times where it's around ticking clocks. You hear little things like ticking clocks and stuff like that that happen. So that's, for me, that's why Hans Zimmer and Interstellar, I've chosen Interstellar as my number 3, because of the genius way that he uses sound and the soundtrack and music to layer over what's happening on the screen. I could say more about it, but if you get a chance, it's not an easy thing to listen to. It is probably something, if you're going to listen to it, have it on in the background while you're doing something. Put your earphones in and just walk around the house and do something. But just listen to the way he layers sound. It's actually quite brilliant. And I know, Dave, you mentioned The Lion King being his best. I reckon Interstellar, for me, Lion King, they're two different things. But for me, the genius of Interstellar is the way he merges the sound in his music with what's happening on the screen. So that's why number 3 is Interstellar for me. Once again, just another one I talked about Oscars before, nominated for an Oscar, but it lost to, and you'll never guess which one it lost to.
Hang on, so what year? 2014,
2014.
Right, 2014. Which
Was it
movie
Whiplash?
won? Not Whiplash.
Because that's a great
That's an
soundtrack.
amazing soundtrack. 2014. Gee.
I'm trying to think back to what was.
No, I couldn't tell you. What was the
Grand
Grand Budapest
Bucharest
Hotel?
Budapest Hotel. The
Is that
Grand
quite a? I
Budapest
haven't
Hotel.
seen that in a while. Is that quite a wacky, zany soundtrack? It's, that's probably why.
Alexander Desplat actually had 2 films that year. His one for the Grand Budapest Hotel, and I can't think of what the other one was, but he actually had 2 nominations, Oscar nominations that year. But yes, it lost out. It was nominated, Interstellar, but lost out to the Grand Budapest Hotel. And if you ask me what the Grand Budapest Hotel sounded like, I couldn't tell you.
Couldn't tell you.
No, I
But
can't remember either.
brilliant movie,
Oh, sorry.
but a brilliant movie.
Interstellar's a great pick. That's my example when people argue that Chris Nolan can't make an emotionally fueled film. They say he's very devoid of emotion, but I'm like, just watch Interstellar. Like, that is a heartbreaking film. I haven't watched it since I became a father, and I'm really nervous to now because that destroyed me before I was a dad, and now like that I have a young daughter, I just feel like I'm just gonna be a wreck from minute one, pretty much. But there's a beautiful score. Like when you said that, I was like, yeah, that is a really good score. David, what's your number 3?
Yeah, well, we're going to go back to John Williams again.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're going to Harry Potter for number
So
3.
good.
And I'm going to John Williams only scored the first 3. So I'm only just going to include his music for the first 3. I think the others are really strong as well, and you've got some really good composers composing the others. But I think the first 3, and probably The Prisoner of Azkaban, is the best, I would say, and arguably is also the best movie from my point of view. But I think, you know, the way that Williams uses, he just it is in literally a magical score. It's
really is.
memorable, particularly the main theme, and Hedwig's theme is probably the most instantly recognizable one.
Of course.
But it just creates this. It does. It really encapsulates the magical world that's Hogwarts and you know, Diagon Alley. And,
yes, Diagon. I was going to say Diagon Alley.
And even Azkaban, the prison, and you know, like I've you know, picked out a few. I want to highlight The Prisoner of Azkaban because I think it shows how diverse his score can be. Because if you listen back to the soundtrack for The Prisoner of Azkaban, it sort of starts out. Obviously, you get your Hedwig's theme, but pretty early on the movie, you get the night bus scene.
Which that's a very I would say borderline Danny Elfman style soundtrack. It's very zany, very oingo boingo.
It absolutely is. It's chaotic. It's bombastic. It's everything that John Williams like you wouldn't expect. And then you get later on, you get that very ethereal kind of choir when the Patronus, in the Patronus scene. So it completely changes that. And then you got the Dementors later on. That's it's just classic Gothic horror music. So he just has this ability to capture in music the characters and the environment that you're in. It, you know, and it's just the Quidditch scenes.
I was going to say, I was waiting for Quidditch. I'm like, you didn't say Quidditch. I'm going to mention it. Yeah.
You know, that's just that energy and action and thrill and excitement and the whole, you know, so you just get these soaring kind of melodies that come about, and it's now instantly recognizable, as recognizable as Superman, as Star Wars. You play that, you know, you're hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't know or doesn't recognize a Harry Potter theme.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Yeah. So
I think if you know, and you know how HBO Max are doing basically revisiting all the Harry Potter films as part of a series, and I think they'll use, and I hope they do, John Williams' score or part of it, at least the Harry Potter theme, as part of those films, because there's nothing to me more iconic when you think Harry Potter than hearing that music that plays.
I don't know how you don't. You know, I haven't watched all of Rings of Power yet. Honestly, I don't know if I ever will. I watched one episode of Rings of Power. It was a bit slow for me. But one thing that was glaringly missing was the Lord of the Rings score, like that iconic score. Is Howard Shore? It's Howard Shore who does the Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
I have a feeling it might show up a little bit later, so I won't go into too much. But like, that's such an iconic sound, and like to have none of that was a glaring omission for me. And I was like, oh, I probably would have been more into this if I had, you know, those big drums and and strings and horns
Yeah.
of that score. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it'd be a misstep to do a Harry Potter show without that theme, even
Yeah.
even if they want to do their own thing. Like, I don't know, they made all their Star Wars movies and kept the old score, and so
Yeah.
yeah.
And then the scenes in Harry Potter within the various movies, there's been a number of them where they have a Christmas scene. You know, there's
Yes,
a Christmas, and so
Hagrid dragging the tree through the Great Hall.
yeah, and it's the music of Christmas. He just captures it. He just captures the emotion of it. So, yeah. So I think Harry Potter is wonderful. It's magical. There we go.
Yeah, it's very twinkly. That's what I think of when I think of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But I would say, like,
What do
for
you
a
think?
John Williams score, like, it's one of the films where it's got so many identifiable themes as well. Like, some of his scores, I can't tell you every single piece of music from Raiders, for example, but I can tell you the Raiders theme. But then, like, Star Wars, I can tell you quite a few themes, and same with Harry Potter. I can hum a few different tunes in there. It's so iconic across, from start to finish, with so many like wonderful individual pieces of music. It's an excellent choice.
Yeah. There we go. Harry Potter.
Excellent. That brings it back to me. So I'm going to go into the rock and roll world now. My number 3 is a soundtrack that I first heard in 2006, and was pretty much on repeat, I would say, all summer. Like, when I first heard, I'm like, this is the best. It's rocking. It's funny. I heard the soundtrack before I saw the movie, so it did kind of pretty much tell me the whole story of the movie, but that's okay. It was Jack Black, so I was happy about that. And it's The Pick of Destiny, which is the Tenacious D film.
Yes.
Which, look, the film itself is exactly what you would expect it to be. It's very silly. It's very over the top. Like, it's quite nonsensical. But the music in it's great. Like, it's like, it does what it needs to do. Like, every joke lands. It's very like classic rock and roll, like with their their kind of unique Jack Black Kyle Gass spin. And it tells the story. Like, as I said, I didn't need to see the movie because I heard this the session. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get the story. Like, it's not, it's very easy to follow, but every track is just fun. Like, it's a really good time. And obviously, in the confines of a film, you don't get to enjoy the full song. Often they will have to kind of do a 2-minute snip, or they will kind of like integrate it with action and diegetic sound, which takes away from it. But that soundtrack from start to finish on its own is pure bliss. Dave Grohl voicing Satan in the final boss is great. Really, really good stuff. And just some of the, like, again, like, there's a love song between the two boys, like, where like they miss each other. So there's a love song with, like, it's almost like a parody of Let It Be, because there's like keys and guitar solos. And then there's a song about the Sasquatch, which is really important, I think. So, it's not quite as good as maybe their debut album, because that didn't have an agenda. They were like, oh, we're just going to throw together 17 songs, whereas this had to sell the movie. But I don't know, like, it's pretty flawless. It's really fun. It's really rocking. It's exactly what you want from a Jack Black album, I think. So,
Yeah.
Pick of Destiny is my choice for number 3.
Who's the guy with Jack Black? What's the other guy's name?
Kyle Gass.
That's him, Kyle Gass. They just go together. When you think about their Tenacious D, you just see them both. I mean, I know Jack Black's the front man, really, but they're both just there. Their music is very satirical, very kind of, no, not satirical. That's probably the wrong word. But yeah, just that fun and that rock anthems that they play, and yeah, so it is. Not that I've seen Pick of Destiny, but I do know Tenacious D and Jack Black, and that sort of. So yeah, I can see why you'd pick those guys, because
It's really interesting that you mentioned. Oh, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I was just saying, it's really interesting that you mentioned Jack Black being the front man, because I think it was on either the DVD extras of the movie, or they also did a concert tour where they just recreated the movie as a stage show, which is brilliant, by the way. Like, there's a DVD of it, and they have like like guys in costumes, and they're like from hell and stuff like that. It's really wacky. But there's a special feature, it's like a documentary, and during promoting the film, everyone wanted to interview Jack Black because Jack Black was Jack Black, but they're like, oh, we don't need the other guy. To the point where, like, the band came pretty close to splitting up, because he was just like, look, like, I'm half the band, man. Like, just because I'm not in Kung Fu Panda or like School of Rock, like, I've got something to say. Like, why do they want to talk to me? But Jack Black's like an absolute sweetheart. Like you say in the documentary, he's like, let's just get out of here. He goes, let's just cancel the interview. Like, they can interview no one. It's either both of us or no one. But it's pretty fascinating. And then they went on to write a song about it later, I think, on their third album. And it's all about how, like, Kyle felt underappreciated and was just angry all the time because they're meant to be best buddies, this band, and the world only wanted Jack Black. It's a really interesting story, and the documentary is fantastic. But yeah, the music they put out is always consistently like. They had a new music video recently, a video game music video. I don't know if you guys saw that one, but that's really fun.
I saw something on social media. I don't know what it was. It must have been Instagram or something like that with them both there. And I couldn't tell you what it was, but something does. Yeah, you mentioned video game. I think it does have something to do with that.
Yeah, no, it's just a lot of fun. And like for me, like I was 18 when that movie came out. I was like the perfect age for Pick of Destiny. Like, I was the direct audience for that flick. So, another really fun one.
Awesome, James.
Excellent. That brings us back to you, Matt. Number 2, we're flying through these lists, killing it.
You just want me to slow it down a little bit, do you? Just to
No, it's
slow
all good.
it.
Only if you move in slow motion as well.
So, this movie was the first of, I think it ended up being, I'm trying to think how many movies there were. I think there were 6 movies in the end by the time they did the whole lot. This one first came out in 2001. It was mentioned not too long ago, and it is The Lord of the Rings. Yes. This one is The Fellowship of the Ring, though.
Yes.
So there's now when you look across, and Howard Shore was the writer and composer of the pieces of music that go across. And I mentioned 6 films because that you throw in the Hobbit films,
of course,
there, which did stretch out to really 3 films. But overall, there were 11 hours just across the Lord of the Rings movies, 11 hours of music that went along with the Lord of the Rings. Now, I reckon for Howard Shore, that really is. Howard Shore wasn't really well known until he did the Lord of the Rings. He did a few movies in the 80s, and there were some, reasonably well known movies. But I think he did some. I mentioned earlier. I did AI. No, he didn't. That wasn't Howard Shore. That was John Williams again. But his music for the Lord of the Rings it's haunting. It's beautiful, but it's just that perfect setting. When you only got to put a picture up of New Zealand and the mountains and around this, particularly around the South Island, you kind of get that sound in your head automatically around what that music might be like in the background. Just the Lord of the Rings and look, particularly the Shire piece. When you go into the Shire in Hobbiton and you see the hobbits, just that kind of whimsical, folksy.
Yeah.
Lots of, clarinets and woodwind and whistles and all of that sort of stuff that goes along with the sound of the Shire. But that, once again, I talked about earlier, a theme that goes through a movie. That theme runs through probably the first half of the Fellowship of the Ring. And there's a point at which Sam and Frodo cross the boundary of the Shire. And they both say, and Sam says to Frodo, "Oh, this is the furthest I've ever been." Now, up until that point, you hear the Shire theme. But beyond that, after that, it changes. The music actually changes and it becomes this, it is an iconic sort of another theme that runs through the rest of the movies. Without listening to the soundtrack, it's a bit hard to describe, but it's most notable when they get to meet Gandalf at Rivendell. And you can hear it there when they come out of the mines of Moria and the Khazad-dûm after defeating the Balrog. You hear it again there. This music just sort of weaves its way, and you lose sight of the Shire. And it's that idea that as the hobbits are going closer and closer towards Mount Doom, they hear less and less of the Shire. And it actually comes back again in Return of the King. It actually comes back again when Frodo and Sam start, they put the ring into the fires of Mount Doom and they're struggling up to the sides of the volcano there, and you hear the Shire music coming back, and it's that idea that we're drawing you back to the Shire. There are actually elements of the Return of the King that I think actually, when you look at the music across all of the films of the Lord of the Rings, there's one piece of music, and it's not in the Fellowship of the Ring, but it's in the Return of the King. It's called the Grey Havens. Now, in the I don't know if you sort of think that the Grey Havens at the end of Return of the King, Frodo goes off with Gandalf and goes across the seas into that area was called the Grey Haven, but he goes out into the west. But that theme that you hear in Return of the King, the Grey Havens, is probably, along with the Shire, I think is really iconic for the Lord of the Rings. So there are just quite a few things in the Lord of the Rings, and you just hear it. It's just that sound that goes with the movie. It just matches like Harry Potter. The music goes with the film, and everyone knows it, everyone identifies it. You play it, and everyone says, "Yep, that's the Lord of the Rings music." So that's why, for me, the Fellowship of the Ring, the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring, is my number 2.
It's brilliant. Like I think David mentioned ethereal before, and that's the perfect way to describe this soundtrack. Like even in the narration, Galadriel's narration at the start of the film, talking about the age of men and like the 11 rings, or I can't remember who it was. Like that haunting. Like it's not a nice, friendly piece of music. It's very much a warning. It's like you're about to, like, we're not going to have a fun time here. Like I mean, we are, but like our characters are not going to have a fun time. Like it's very wary. And I saw something recently, and I can't remember which piece it was. I think it was the Ringwraith theme. They said, but I could be wrong. But there's a dark piece of music, a villainous piece of music, where it's actually the Shire theme slowed down and in reverse. They're like, it's the same piece of music, but they've slowed it down and put it backwards, or maybe they put it in the minor key. But it's ostensibly the same piece of music, but warped and twisted because these creatures were once men or once kind of friendly, and now they've been corrupted and gone dark. So, but it is just a genius little piece. It's like, oh, like what a great idea to take a theme that's so friendly and welcoming and just like bring some sinister tones into it. So I saw that only like 3 weeks ago. I saw that. I was like, oh, I've got to rewatch this now and listen out for it. But sorry.
When you listen to the music, the Howard Shore's music, if you sort of listen to it back to back, it really does tell the journey that they go on. It takes just you can picture the journey they're going on just by listening to the music. So,
and maybe
this one.
Sorry, go on.
No, you go on, because I reckon you're going to follow on from what Dave said. I was going to say something slightly different, but go ahead, James.
I was just going to talk about how epic the score is. It's just, it's so big in places, like especially again like the Ringwraiths, which is probably my favorite piece of music from all the films. Just their theme, because it's so loud and over the top and overstimulating, and very, like there's an overwhelming sense of doom that comes with it, maybe only beaten by the Imperial March. Like it's just so, there's just a sense of dread whenever you hear it. It's so big and wonderful. That's all I was going to say.
No, look, in all of my picks, I've talked about Oscar nominations in this one, but of course, the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring won Best Original Score for 2001. But I think actually this is probably one of the best years for musical Best Original Score. So Steven Spielberg did the music for AI that year. I mentioned The Beautiful Mind earlier, which was something that James Horner did. Yep, that's right. Harry Potter, Philosopher's Stone, that came out that year, and also Monsters Inc. So there's you've got 5 really quite iconic musical scores that in 2001 that either of those could easily have won that year.
It was Monsters Inc. is a really great pull. Like we talk about all these very serious like films. Well, you guys have. I've been talking about some wacky stuff, but like we haven't really touched on animation for the most part. But that's a really good point. Like Monsters Inc. What a whimsical, wonderful score that is. Like even just the just the theme, the da 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 da. Like that's so good. That's a strong one. David, what's your number 2?
All right, we're going there again, James.
Love it.
We're going to John Williams again.
Yes, I'm not shocked. I was like, if we just get 10 John Williams scores, like that's fine.
Look, it's hard. Look, it's really hard.
He's dominated for over 50 years.
Yeah, they are, and every single one of them are just so instantly recognizable. And my second one, my number 2 is E.T., the Extraterrestrial. It's sadness, it's longing, it's hope, it's uplifting, it's all things that this movie represents. There's this 18-minute sequence at the end of the movie, which includes the tracks. There's 4 tracks that sort of go back to back. One's called Flight. They've got Flight, Escape, Chase, and Saying Goodbye. And that 18-minute sequence of music is just put your headphones on and listen to it. It's an extraordinary. You see it shift through moods. You know, you kind of get that, you know, soaring for Flight, the track. You get that very, you know, iconic ET sound. You know, where he's taking off. The boys are taking off into the sky on the bikes, and then the chase, with the police chasing after them, and then the last sort of 7 minutes or so is Saying Goodbye, which, you know, is just so beautifully harmonious and uplifting, but also sad. Like, they're saying goodbye. So it just grabs all these, you know, different moods and emotions and puts them all together into this amazing sequence of music. So what I wanted to highlight though with John Williams, you know, it may come up again, but he and Steven Spielberg work so closely together in constructing the score, and to the point where, particularly in the last sort of part of the film, where they're saying goodbye, John Williams wrote that music and was thinking, oh, well, Steven's going to come to me and say, oh, I have to edit that bit out, I have to cut that bit because it doesn't fit with the music, the movie. But it actually happened the other way, where Steven Spielberg said, no, leave your music here. I'll time the visuals to match your music. So they really worked in sync with each other. And you know, like John Williams' sense of timing for his music, he just hits every moment. You'd think, you know, in the editing process, the music could get jumbled up, but no, he's just spot on with every little element. So no, it's highly skillful. It's just a beautiful piece of music. Yeah.
It's just a soundtrack to, I think, so many childhoods. Like that particular score, I think more than most, that's the one that kids, or I don't know, but like, obviously not today, but like from our era, I think so many children will be so familiar with that. And particularly, those final kind of 18 minutes you're talking about, it's just so iconic and just a staple of being young, you know, because that's what that movie is. It's just about being young and
just the adventure. Go on.
As a family, it was a few years ago now. So I've got 4 girls. My eldest is now 18, and my youngest is 11. But when they were much younger, we all sat down as a family and watched ET. And it is just, they hadn't seen the movie up until that point. They'd heard about it, and you still see it. Like even now, there's an ad that, you know, I think it's a Kia or a Hyundai ad or whatever it is, or what, you know, where you see the car just driving along, and all of a sudden it just kind of lifts off, and ET, you know, you've got the music in the background. So even then, it's still a cultural icon. Even now, and a lot of kids wouldn't even realise now that music was part of ET. But I remember sitting the kids down and we watched ET, and it does make you cry. It makes you, all the memories that come back. And you've only got to do that by listening to the soundtrack. You know, like Dave said, put your headphones in, just listen to those last 4 tracks. If that's all you listen to, just listen to those last 4 tracks, and you'll be instantly transported back to the first time when you watched ET, and just heard what was going on. You know, you don't need the visuals, you don't need what's happening, you know, on the screen, or what. You just hear the music and you'll be transported back. I guarantee it.
Excellent. These are some great lists. Like
smashing it, mate.
Yeah, nothing short of iconic from both of you. It's really great. My number 2 is, I'm going into the world of comedy again. You would have noticed that pretty much everything I've gone from has been musicals. I ended up going with original music for the movies. The last one is a little bit different, but my number 2 is it's got more of a hip hop flair, which is something that I really lean into much. But basically, there's this group of musicians who were also writers on SNL. They now perform as a rap group called The Lonely Island. They did songs like "I'm on a Boat" and some other ones that are a bit rude for me to say, but like that's basically their jam. But in 2016, they made a biopic of a fictional rapper, kind of a la This Is Spinal Tap a little bit. And it's called Pop Star Never Stop Never Stopping. And basically, uh, it's just like the soundtrack is just the music that he performs from him kind of breaking off. He was part of like a really big rap group in the 90s called the Style Boys. And then he was the popular one. He was kind of like Beyonce of the group. So he broke off and went solo. And the other guys kind of got left behind. And the movie tracks his journey, like launching his kind of second album, which flops, and he's kind of made to look a bit foolish and like a bit of a he's a bit old hat, and now like the new wave of rappers are kind of coming in to replace him, and then kind of his quest to find out what it means to be an artist, but also like respect his past and kind of make amends with his boys, and then try to get back in the charts. It's really funny. It's a movie that was definitely underappreciated at the time. I think people didn't really quite know what it was, but it's got Andy Samberg in the lead, who is great in everything. Like if you've seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine,
Yeah.
he's got the chops. But
Funny.
so what was that?
I said it's funny. It's
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah, so he plays our lead, and then the other two boys from Lonely Island, Yorma and Akiva, are in it as well. There's a ton of cameos. You've got Usher, Pink is in it. She does a track with him. Emma Stone plays like a dance artist. Seal is in it. Seal like plays like the singer at his wedding. It's crazy. But the songs are good. Like that's the thing. Like they're funny the first couple of times, but I've listened to those songs so many times now where I'm just like, it's just it's just second nature to me. Like one of my favorite tracks is about the Mona Lisa. So because he's so uncultured, he went to France and just didn't get it. I think the chorus goes, "Mona Lisa, you're an overrated piece of shit," which is wildly funny. But yeah, it's just
Was Pink in that movie too?
yeah, Pink's in it.
Pink
So
really, that's
they
right, yeah.
sing a song about equal rights, and he's standing up for gay marriage, but
Yeah.
the entire song he's just admitting how straight he is. It's like you can't really kind of make a film like this anymore. I would say it definitely crosses the line of being politically incorrect. But if you can look over some of that stuff,
was it? When was that?
2016.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, I think audiences have changed a lot in the last couple of years, but it's very tongue in cheek. There's a bunch of SNL all stars in there as well, but it's good fun. It's good fun, and the music, as I said, is quite good. I was shocked how good it was, but it's a good flick and a good soundtrack. So, and that one plays constantly. Like there probably doesn't go a week where I don't listen to a song from Popstar. It's always cranking. So
is it fun? So I remember seeing the trailer for it. I do remember seeing the trailer for it, and I watched it. I'm thinking, man, this movie is going to be a cracker. Just the title alone.
Yeah.
never stop, never stopping. I thought that was just hilarious. It's just one of those. But I haven't actually seen the movie, but just I remember the trailer quite vividly and the title. So yeah, I must get it. I must watch it.
I think it was one of those ones that Liz and I might have stumbled across on Netflix one night, just doing the Netflix scroll and gone, oh, this looks quite funny. Let's watch that. Yeah. So
yeah, it's good fun. So I mean, look, it's very cursy. So like, don't let your kids watch it. But for the adults or for the more mature teens, it's a good time. But yeah, really fun.
Good one.
Matt, that brings us to your number one.
All right, number one.
We're gonna.
This is
we're gonna
score.
Well, I think we're gonna do this one together because I'm just about guaranteed we're gonna have the same one.
Yeah, I reckon we probably will. But I guess it's which one though.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh, yeah, well, we probably will have the same one. But let's. So, 1980. Once again, scored by the legendary John Williams, who he's been mentioned a few times. Look, to be honest, I could have easily had my top five all John Williams. Realistically, I did think about it, and I thought, it's probably not great. We're going, for me, all we talk about is John Williams scores, but quite honestly, they could have easily been top 5. But this one for me, just the fact that I love these movies, growing up with them, all my life. Dave and I have, obviously being of that era, growing up, being born in '78 and growing up through the '80s, and even into the '90s, being able to see these movies was a real pleasure. But it is Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. I've decided as my number one. There's a couple of reasons why I've chosen The Empire Strikes Back for number one. And in The Empire Strikes Back, John Williams introduces probably the most iconic themes that run through the whole Star Wars series of movies. But before I go any longer, Dave, is there anything that you want to like? Is this where you're going as well?
That's exactly what I have as number one as well.
Nice.
The Empire Strikes Back. Yeah.
I was sitting here. I'm like, guys, no one's mentioned Star Wars yet. Like, it's got to. I know David at least is a huge Star Wars fan. I assumed that you were very much the same. I'm like, we've got to get to Star Wars soon. Like, what's going on? So yeah.
But the music starts before Disney took over 20th Century Fox. The music starts from the 20th Century Fox fanfare.
Yes.
So the old Star Wars movies, if you can recall, and many of you will, they always started with the whole dun, 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 for the 20th Century Fox. That was it. And every time I heard that on TV or someone was playing it on VHS or something like that, I went, "Oh, that's Star Wars." So it even started before the Star Wars theme even, and then it of course you break into the Star Wars opening theme, and the themes in every Star Wars movies is different. At least the start, the crawl, the title crawl is the same, but then from then on, it transitions into something very different for every movie. It doesn't go the same way. And for Empire, the Empire introduces, and I've written down the number of themes that John Williams actually introduces in, there's actually a name for these themes. They're called leitmotifs. And he does an amazing thing in John Williams. Is he creates these themes to represent characters or places or parts of his world that any time it comes on the screen, it references it in the music. So, Dave, did you want to talk about anything else before I go on? Or
no. I mean, you continue on, and I'll just fill in the gaps because I wouldn't mind referencing some of the other music from some of the other movies that he
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think what Empire Strikes Back does is it introduces for the first time the Imperial March. Now, there was an Imperial theme in Star Wars: A New Hope, but in The Empire Strikes Back, it changed. It changed to an Imperial March because it became effectively Darth Vader's theme. Now, whenever Darth Vader appeared on screen, whenever you saw a Star Destroyer, whenever you saw some stormtroopers and it can even happen within scenes. Now, in The Empire Strikes Back, the scene where Han Solo, goes into carbon freeze, there in that scene, every time the camera transitions from Han and Leia, and John Williams plays Han and Leia's love theme, and then the next bit you see Vader and the Imperials, and it plays the Imperial March, and then it goes back to Han and Leia, and then it goes back to the Imperial March. But the way he weaves them together is quite amazing. And there's probably about 35 different times throughout that movie the Imperial March theme plays. There might be fractions of it, might be 5 or 10 seconds of it, but it just weaves its way through that whole film. But not only do we get that, we get Yoda's theme. So then Yoda's theme becomes a key part of the movies going forward and continues to be. We get
which Yoda's theme is very similar. Yoda's theme is very similar to the E.T. soundtrack too. Very similar, yeah.
And interestingly, the Empire was written and done before ET, but you still see those same musical sounds. Yeah, where that is very similar, isn't it? Very similar. And even Han and Leia's theme is actually very similar to the love theme in Indiana Jones as well.
Yeah.
So you listen to both of those, very similar references, and interestingly, Harrison Ford's in both of those as well. But we even get in Empire, we even get Boba Fett's theme. Now, I don't know if you ever hear Boba Fett's theme anywhere else in the movie, even in the Boba Fett series, you don't even hear this theme. But John Williams even created a theme for Boba Fett and the Bounty Hunters. But there's a couple of iconic ones. The asteroid scene where it's like a chase scene, so you hear this music play in the background. And I think in what was it? No, it wasn't. No, it was the Family Guy. It was the Family Guy Star Wars. Do you ever see the Family Guy Star Wars animated? And what's the guy? What's the Family Guy's name?
Peter Griffin.
I can't even think the main. Yeah, Peter Griffin. He's in the Star. He's in there, and he's in the cockpit, and he's in the gunners. The gunners seat,
and he's humming it.
As he's shooting the TIE fighters, he's humming this thing in the background. That's how iconic this music is. I had to laugh when I saw that. But that's what John Williams does. He creates this opera, and it's called a space opera, and it's a space opera for a reason, because the music goes with the characters, with the scenes, with what's happening on the screen. John Williams does an amazing job of bringing that all together and adding to the film itself, and all the layers that go with it. And like I said earlier, these leitmotifs that he has through all these movies, really. When you think about John Williams, that's what we're really talking about, these iconic motifs and themes that run through his movies. And for me, Empire Strikes Back did that the best, or his work in Empire did that the best. So that's why I've picked that as number one.
Nice one.
Yeah, and if I just could add, there's a lot of other from some of the other movies too. There's Matt mentioned Leia's theme, but there's also Duel of the Fates, which was in Phantom Menace.
Such a great piece.
Yeah,
like that's. I know people like to hate on Phantom Menace. I actually don't dislike Phantom Menace. I think it's quite a fun movie. But if you can point to one triumph in that film, I don't think any Star Wars fan can disagree on it. So that piece of music is incredible.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. There's the Mos Eisley Cantina.
Yep.
Band, the band thing. Even from The Last Jedi, which I think unfairly gets whacked. I don't mind The Last Jedi, but the Battle of Crate is a terrific piece of music as well. It's a little bit similar. There's the Hoth scene in Empire Strikes Back, and the Battle of Crate music is very similar to that. And there's also one from Attack of the Clones called Across the Stars, which is just a stunning piece of music. So, he's really across 30 years, he did an extraordinary achievement there with all those movies. Yeah, so I agree.
I would say that Rey's theme in the new in The Force Awakens, I think Rey's theme, the few of these really kind of the stronger themes that run through his music. I think, you mentioned a couple there, Dave, but I'd add Rey's theme to that. Go back and listen. Actually, the first time I heard Rey's theme, it reminded me of Indiana Jones in that sense, that kind of that adventurous sense that Rey's had that discovery. So yeah, for sure.
There we go, James. Shared number one.
Nice one. Excellent. I think that's it. As I said, it's okay to cross over. You can have the same answers, but good stuff. My last one, my number one, is a soundtrack, and this is actually one of the few soundtracks, the only one on my list that wasn't written for the movie. It is just a collection of songs, but I think it's just such a great compilation, and I've listened to this soundtrack maybe almost as much as Blues Brothers, which is funny because this film came out 30 years after Blues Brothers. It's such a wonderful collection of songs, and it is the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack, Volume 2.
Oh, Volume 2.
Volume 2, which it might be controversial because I know that everyone loves that first one. I think Volume 3 is too obscure for me. I only knew maybe a couple of songs, but Volume 2 really hit the sweet spot. Like opening with Mr. Blue Sky, which has been one of my favorite songs since as long as I can remember. I think is a great piece. but using The Chain by Fleetwood Mac as
Yeah.
this kind of theme for the movie, the whole idea, like it's a song literally about a family, falling apart, and then but trying to make it work still, which is exactly what that movie's about the entire time. I'm so glad that someone, thought to put Brandy or a Fine Girl by Looking Glass in a movie. Like it's such, like what a wonderful way to open that movie, because that is the first song in the film. It's the flashback with Kurt Russell, and they're playing that song.
Yeah.
Like everyone thinks Mr. Blue Sky is the first song, but it's actually Brandy. Father and Son, the Cat Stevens song. Like the first time I saw that movie in theaters, I didn't cry in that funeral scene. I was like, okay, like I didn't really feel that way about Yondu, but then on the rewatch, I'm like, oh, this is really tough to watch. This is really well done.
Pretty heart wrenching, isn't it? It's pretty heart wrenching when you watch it.
So good. Bring It On Home to Me by Sam Cooke.
Yes.
That's
where Peter and Gamora are dancing.
Yeah, when they're dancing. Yeah. They do a really good job of, like, James Gunn and Tyler Bates found really wonderful, like, love songs for Peter and Gamora in each of the films. But that's my favorite one. And then, like, the last song on the track, which is sung by David Hasselhoff, Guardians Inferno, is a disco rendition of the Tyler Bates score from the first Guardians film. Really? Like, that's what it is, but it's like upbeat, like up tempo, and like they all appeared in the video clip for it. And it just really captures the spirit of that film. But when I worked, slinging DVDs back in the day, this CD was on playlists just about every day, I would say, and people got sick of it. But I didn't. So, and then, like, I listened to into my car. Look, I just think it's such a strong compilation of tracks. Fox on the Run, which is actually only the trailer, they put that in there as well by the Sweet. It's just great. Like, it's just, every song is just a classic song. It's a really feel good soundtrack. And like, it was kind of like, I wasn't sure whether to put this or Forrest Gump on my list, because the Forrest Gump soundtrack is very good as well. But if I'm honest with you, I only listened to disc 1 of 2 of Forrest Gump, because it's about 32 songs. But the Guardians one from start to finish I can listen to. I just think it's a perfect compilation and really captures the spirit of where that franchise was headed. The first Guardians is actually kind of the most serious of the 3, although 3 does get very dark. Like, it's kind of like figuring out its tone, and like it has a few like kind of pop song stuff. But 2, I think, is like, that is the tone they were trying to go for. That's what James Gunn was always aiming for. Was like, this is the family, this is the group, this is what they look like and sound like, and this soundtrack really represents, I think, the Guardians over the 3 films. So that's my pick. I love it. I think it's a really good compilation.
I know you're the host, James, and you get to ask the questions, but I got one.
I love when people ask me questions. I don't get to answer them very often. So.
How do you now rank the 3 Guardians movies?
It's tough, It's tough. Like, I think 3 is. I've only seen 3 once, so like, got to keep that in mind. I've seen 1 and 2 quite a few times. 3 I really, really like. I think it's a really bold and brilliant movie. Like, to go down that route. Like, when I was going into Guardians 3, have you seen Guardians 3 as well, Matt? Okay.
I've seen 3.
I won't go into spoilers then. But I had a pretty good idea of where I thought the film was going, and there were certain things I wanted to happen to characters. The film is so emotionally draining that I'm glad that the film kind of went in the way that it did. And that's not really a spoiler. I'm being very vague, but like, I was expecting like lots of things to happen, and kind of the direction that James Gunn took it, I thought, was a very satisfying conclusion. Tina has said she will never watch it again. She's like, it was great, but I can't ever see myself watching it again because all of the flashback stuff is too much for her. It definitely made me cry the most out of all the Guardians films, definitely out of all the Marvel films. It's a real heart wrencher. I don't know how I rank the films. Like, I haven't seen 3 enough to kind of put it in a ranking yet. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe 1 goes down the bottom, and not because it's not good. Just 1 was very unique and bold for its time, but 2 really got to build on a lot of stuff, and 3, I just think we just get to see the best of every one of those characters. Like, every every actor gets the chance to really show what they're able to do in that film. So I think 2 and 3 have the edge over 1, but I don't know. I'll change my mind in 6 months probably. So they're not really an answer. Sorry.
That's all right. I absolutely adored number 3.
Yeah.
Just loved it. Loved it. Yeah. So.
And the way that it ends, like I know that James Gunn's not going to be involved with Marvel anymore, or like I know he hasn't like explicitly said that, but if he's running DC, he's not going to have time to be involved with Marvel. Based on those post-credit sequences, I really hope they do follow up with both of those sequences. I think it sets up some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. Excellent. Good lists, everyone. Now, I think we've all got a few honorable mentions. Is that fair to say?
Oh, I've got a very long list
definitely.
of honorable mentions. Yeah.
Well, we can rattle through them. We don't have to go into as much detail, but if you want to kind of rattle off a few, like we can talk about, because like it's such a broad category. Like the thing with this show, Matt, which I didn't tell you at the start, is it's a very unfair show. The concept is pick 5, and and wrestle with your choices for the weeks leading up to it, and then have regrets after the show. But we can definitely highlight some of your honorable mentions if there's some ones you want to shout out.
Am I right? Am I right in saying that Dave, you were the one who introduced honourable mentions?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Doing?
Did I introduce honourable mentions? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I remember hearing your first podcast with James, and I just wondered. I think you might have. I vaguely recall you saying, James, you'll correct me because you've done 50 odd of these now. So I recall you saying something about, can I have some honourable mentions? And I don't know, but James, is that right, or you can't remember?
It would be pretty close because I did. Well,
okay.
I said to you that David. I don't know if I said this on mic or off mic, but David broke the rules immediately because he brought 6, I think, 6 movies instead of 5, one for each decade. But we on a previous podcast I did, we always did honorable mentions. I wouldn't have done them in the first couple of episodes. Okay. So actually, David might be the first one to have done them because the very first episode, Tina and I did our favorite films of 2021. Second episode, we did top 5 Scorsese films. Episode 3, it was my dad, and I'll be honest, I think he brought 8 movies. I can't remember exactly. I kind of so yeah, I think David probably was the first person to have honorable mentions.
I broke your podcast. That's what you're saying.
Well, well, I reckon I've got quite a few, and I reckon David, I'm going to throw in a couple of soundtracks as well, other than musical scores. I'm going to throw in a couple here. One of them being Pulp Fiction.
Yes.
I think the Pulp Fiction soundtrack is quite iconic and very memorable. I'd also like to say, now, this might be one that lots of people, probably David my age and James, correct me but I reckon Good Morning Vietnam.
Yes.
If there's not a soundtrack that best represents that Vietnam War area, and you could argue probably maybe Apocalypse Now, and there's probably a few others. The Thin Red Line does it really well as well. But
I would say not a movie, but the series Tour of Duty has a really good Vietnam War soundtrack.
Very true, very true. But I think Good Morning Vietnam was an outstanding mix of songs in there that best represent that era. Just a few. Well, I say a few others, but Dave, you've mentioned a couple. We've mentioned a couple already around Titanic. I think Danny Elfman's Batman is really iconic as well. And at the very start, James, you talked about those themes that play through, superhero themes, and that one's there. Superman by John Williams, I think, is another one represent for that. Jaws for me is historic. If not, if you actually listen to the Jaws soundtrack itself, it tones itself down, way down from the Jaws that very iconic Jaws sound. There are actually some quite beautiful moments. There's a piece of music in Jaws called Out to Sea, which is very whimsical and very upbeat and uplifting.
Yeah.
And it does turn dark, but yeah. Look, a few others. I reckon the 1917 track by Thomas Newman. It's not one that's really well known, and I don't know if you've seen 1917.
It's on my list to watch. I just haven't got to it yet, but yeah.
So 1917 is, for me, one of the better war movies, and there's some fantastic war movies. But for me, the 1917, there's this one scene where it's called, and I think it's called The Night Window, where he runs out and there's a whole lot of flares and stuff. The music that runs through that is amazing. So probably not the whole album, but I reckon there's key pieces of that are amazing. Raiders with John Williams once again. People would argue as well that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly by Ennio Morricone. Now, if that doesn't say to you the West, the American West, by listening to that sound, The Godfather, I'd say, is another one.
If I can be
And I'll
controversial,
finish.
I prefer Fistful of Dollars, both the movie and the soundtrack, to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Oh, there you go.
Just to get a little bit controversial, like I actually prefer both the movie and the music, but that's not taking anything away from Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah,
got to be contrarian on this show.
Happy to debate it, but there's just some. For me, when I think about those sounds in the West and things like that, but his music, Ennio Morricone's music, and he even did it for
The Hateful Eight.
What's it? What? Hateful Eight.
The Hateful
Eight.
And Django he did as well.
And Django,
and Django as well. Yeah, so they're both. Yeah, and his music is really iconic. And one last mention I'll mention is Contact by Alan Silvestri. I think Alan Silvestri is probably one of those. You mentioned Forrest Gump earlier, James, but I think Alan Silvestri as a film composer, he's a little bit understated, but his music is really quite iconic as well. And I think his music for Contact, if you get a chance to listen to Contact and even see that movie, the one that was done quite a long time ago now with Jodie Foster's movie, I think is a great soundtrack that goes along with that as well. So they're my long list of honourable mentions.
Silvestri's a great pull. Like he's responsible for both that Avengers theme, that march that we all know. Like he did that one, and he did the first Avenger, which is why there's such a common thread between those two theme songs. They're very similar. And I think he also did Kick-Ass, if I remember correctly. Like just randomly, which actually is a brilliant score as well. Like that's a great superhero score, Kick-Ass. For a film that called Kick-Ass, like it didn't need to be as big as it was, and it's great. But Silvestri's a great pull.
Yeah, and he did Spider-Man as well, the original Spider-Man movies. And,
yes.
Yeah, so those quite iconic superhero movies he's done a lot of, and his work on the Avengers, particularly Endgame, is outstanding. So,
What about you, Dave? You got some honorable mentions for us?
Yeah. So I also had of Matt's list, I had Jurassic Park and Interstellar, and The Lord of the Rings. We're very close to my top 5. Jaws, Matt mentioned, is an honorable mention for me. Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump. James, you mentioned earlier, Forrest Gump is a brilliant soundtrack. Couple of other probably a bit more obscure ones. So Mary Poppins is a magnificent soundtrack, and that almost made my list too. I love listening to La La Land.
Yeah, really good.
We've spoken. I think when Liz was on last time, and she doesn't quite like La La Land, but I love that movie.
That music is. I haven't seen the movie since I saw it in theaters, but the music is that comes up quite a bit on my iPod as well. Like
the opening track, Another Day of Sun, is just magnificent. So La La Land. What else did I have? I had Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven.
Yes.
I had Out of Africa. That's a John Barry and Meryl Streep and Robert Redford for back in the 80s. Out of Africa is a wonderful soundtrack. And the last one, which I love listening to if I need to try and get to sleep, is Arrival from Johan Johansson, because it features
great film.
Yeah, it features a track from Max Richter called The Nature of Something. I've lost the name of it. But his track, I'll find it out for you. But the soundtrack to Arrival is it again, beautiful, great film, and also equally great soundtrack. So yeah, they are my honourable mentions. I'm trying to find The Nature of Daylight, I think, is the track that I'm thinking about from Max Richter. But yeah,
nice one. Next, I got a couple as well. Forrest Gump, obviously, we've mentioned a couple of times. Both the soundtrack and the score, I think, is brilliant. Like the Forrest Gump suite, their kind of constant theme throughout the film is beautiful. Baby Driver is more of a newer film, but that soundtrack is really good. Again, it's a 2-disc set. I really listened to the first disc, which is why I didn't put it in my list. But Edgar Wright literally wrote the script around the songs, which is very brave. I think The Wolf of Wall Street is a film that no one really talks about the music, but like the soundtrack and the score. But that soundtrack, like, it's just like it's a 3.5 hour film or something, and like just a perfect mix of songs. It's a really fun soundtrack considering how dark that film gets, but that's a really good soundtrack. A Mighty Wind, which is a Christopher Guest film, all about folk music. So it's basically this is Spinal Tap for folk bands, but the songs are really good. Watchmen, I think that soundtrack is wonderful.
Yeah.
Like that's a really good audio representation of the time. Like just to open the film with "The Times That Are Changing" by Bob Dylan, and then to kind of that final battle lead in with Jimi Hendrix all along the Watchtower. Really good mix of songs. Into the Spider-Verse, I think, is a wonderful score and soundtrack. I still haven't seen Across the Spider-Verse, but the music is very like electronic and loud. And then What's Up Danger, like the big anthem, like kind of Miles' theme at the end as he goes to the final battle, is powerful and bold and everything you need it to be, like as you become a hero. Like there's a moment in the film, I don't know if you remember this, but the whole point of that film is that Miles isn't brave enough to take the leap. That's why he can't be Spider-Man. And when that song kicks in, you see that great upside down shot of him jumping off the building into the sky, and he literally tears the glass off the building with him because everything about him is trying to fight jumping, but like inside he has to just go, and he tears the building with him. It's wonderful. Halloween, I could pick any John Carpenter film and the score is going to be great, but maybe one of the most iconic horror themes of all time. Kill Bill.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think Kill Bill is a wonderful soundtrack. There's some really great kind of jukebox stuff in there. Al Hurt, Zamfir, the Battle with or Without Humanity, Without Honor or Humanity is a wonderful track. Psycho, Bernard Herrmann. Can't go past Psycho. And not just the main, like that theme that everyone knows, like the strings. Like even just the drive, like when she's driving away from the city to the basement of hotel and stuff, like so good. Toy Story is really wonderful.
What about Up?
Up's great as well.
Up is a beautiful soundtrack. Yeah.
I mean, you could pick any Pixar film, but I want to have a Pixar film, and Toy Story. I just think the songs are great. They're very whimsical and very childlike, but then even the music is very big and brassy. Most recently, the Netflix version of Matilda, it took all of Tim Minchin's songs from the stage show. I just want to highlight those stage show songs, but they're done really well in the movie as well. And then The Matrix, I think, is a really good score. Like to kind of have a really kind of dystopian, computer-generated future, but also has like this kind of synth industrial rock in there. Like I think it's a really well-balanced mix of tracks. So. My answer is pretty much everything. I think there's a lot of good soundtracks and scores out there, but there's just a few more to throw in as honorable mentions.
So you could keep going. I mean, I could probably go on for another hour or so talking about John Williams scores. I won't, but and I haven't even mentioned Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yes.
That the key where his music is instrumental to that movie. You have to have John Williams music there for that movie to work.
Yeah,
because that underlines the whole premise of certainly the third act, the end scene towards the end. So you could keep going on and on and on.
I would be remiss actually not to mention it because I mentioned on just about every episode Back to the Future. That just for that theme song alone, just dun, 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 like I think I've hummed it on a dozen episodes, so I had to shout out Back to the Future as well.
But it is a great movie. I mean, not only is the music amazing, but if there isn't, I mean, the more iconic movie of the '80s than Back to the Future, then that'd be it.
Excellent. Well, that's it. We've gone through our list. We've had a number of honorable mentions. Matt, you survived your first episode, so hopefully you had fun talking about soundtracks with us and enjoyed it. You're always welcome to come back, of course. Did anyone have anything they want to throw in before we wrap the episode up? Anything we didn't cover?
No, I'm missing your hot questions, mate. I was all geared up.
I know I didn't do a rapid fire this time. Honestly, as I said, I recorded a 4-hour episode yesterday, so I was just like, I had to get my list. I didn't think of rapid fires, so
No, my palms were sweaty. I'm sort of waiting on you, anticipating your hot questions. But next time, we'll do them next time.
We'll definitely do them next time. Excellent. Well, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of the show, all about soundtracks. It was a lot of fun to step away from movies a little bit and focus on something a bit different. I want to thank David for returning and Matt for his first time on the show. They're both welcome back anytime, of course. In terms of the show, if you want to follow along, you can jump on Instagram. I was a teenage film snob, _ between each word. I post up clips from the show and Blu-rays and all sorts of stuff all the time. I'm pretty active on there. You can follow the show on not Instagram, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts. Leave a review, 5 stars or nothing. No, we'll take any, it's fine. And if you want to buy merchandise, you can head to tpublic.com. We've got t-shirts, hoodies, and stickers, and they look fantastic. I wear my t-shirt all the time when I record. I'm wearing it now. But that's it. So as we say every single week, guys, I was a teenage film snob, but I promise you, I'm trying to be better. We'll see you next week.